let's really just take a dive into it. I want to start off with you, Colin, and talking about PlayStation, who acquired this past week Housemark. They acquired, I believe it's pronounced Nix's.
Yep.
And then also it looks like they're rolling Bluepoint in. And as I said, these aren't really necessarily surprising, but I think they're smart acquisitions and they're built up through long-term, long-standing partnerships. I wanted to pass it off to you right away and just say, do you ever see PlayStation sort of doing the surprise, we got them, kind of like Xbox with I don't think this would happen because they're too profitable, but a Square Enix, do you see them surprising us? Or do you think their way of attacking this is through just pure partnerships and building up year over year to almost lower that asking price?
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think that they're going to go after the likes of Square Enix. I don't even think they have the liquidity to go after Square Enix. And by the way, I don't want that to happen because I think that would suck for Xbox fans and others, Nintendo fans and others.
Right.
I don't want any major, personally as a gamer, I don't want any major existing company to kind of be folded in unless they have a heritage with someone. That's why I was a little surprised, like Remedy, for instance, not being acquired by Xbox.
Mm-hmm.
You almost expected like, well, that was kind of in the cards, and that never happened. But if you look at the history of Sony's acquisitions, they never acquire studios they've never worked with. It never has happened. They obviously bought Guerrilla after Killzone came out. Remember Killzone, or Guerrilla's first game? They were known as Lost Boy Games, and they made some Vietnam shooter. And the same thing went with Evolution during the MotorStorm era, and many others. And then, of course, more recently, Sucker Punch in 2011 after Infamous 2, and then Insomniac in 2019 after 15 or 20 games, and now Housemark after I think 9 games. So I don't, and Bluepoint's going to come too. I mean, these were the 2 studios that I had assumed that they were going to buy. I mean, those were kind of obvious. And then the Nix's thing I thought was kind of interesting, and Sony has no real history with them at all, at least in a credited stance. Nix's, for all we know, might have worked on other games for Sony. I mean, we just found out that Housemark worked on Killzone, multiple Killzone games. We didn't know that. So they helped Killzone Mercenary get shipped on PSP. I'm sorry, not Killzone Mercenary, Killzone, what was the one? Liberation on PSP in 2006. And then they helped on Shadowfall, actually, found out in an interview with Herman Holst. So I don't expect them to make any other big splashes outside of this. I think I keep using the term on our show, and I actually got a listener of ours, in trouble at work because he used it in a inappropriate setting. But I keep using the term, you don't buy the milk when you can get the cow for free.
Yeah, that was jokes.
Yeah, and Sony, I think, is kind of realizing we don't really need to buy more teams. I don't think they can manage more teams, and I think second party relationships that could be first party relationships will be the future. I don't know that they're going to, in other words, I don't know that they're going to come out of the sky and be like, we bought IO, or we bought, or we acquired studios from WB, or I just don't see that. That would be unusual for them.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I found it so fascinating is, a lot of people I felt this past year, a lot of the conversation, we'll get into it, is really honed in on, do we believe in generations and sort of the walking back on that in a couple of ways. But I feel like when you really take a look at PlayStation as a whole, they've been really aggressive, all things considered, right? We saw them for more Sony-wide moves. They nab Evo. They make a partnership with Discord. They teamed up with Jade Raymond. And while she worked on Assassin's Creed like 80 years ago, it's still a significant name to work with. They're teaming up with Firewatch, Deviation Games. They're making all these partnerships nice and early where you could sort of see those seeds being planted where, let's say this Deviation Games thing turns into an acquisition in another decade. Like, do you foresee something like that happening? Not specifically them, but do you think this is kind of them trying to keep that cycle repeating?
Yeah, I think that's true, especially for 2 reasons. Number one is I think some companies that were in the same position are no longer in this position. I think that it was likely that they were going to buy Quantic Dream at some point. I also think it was likely that they were probably looking at Supermassive, and I think both of those studios are now off the market. Quantic Dream, because behind the scenes, I mean, I can tell you their relationship with Sony deteriorated completely, and there's no interest there at all on either side. The other thing with Supermassive is that they haven't. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to ask. Those are my Detroit Became Human guys. Those guys, right?
Yep. Heavy. They did Heavy Rain and then Beyond Two Souls.
Heavy Rain,
and
right?
Then, yep.
And I never knew there was a deterioration there. That's why I was curious.
Yeah. So as we understand it, I had a really weird interaction with David Cage in 2013 in person, right before Beyond Two Souls came out, and you could tell that PR was like really mad at him at that time. And then I had a conversation with Sony PR after Beyond came out, where they're like basically like, "Fuck this dude." And I think that they just had like a third game, and I actually really like their games, but especially
Okay.
Detroit and Heavy Rain. But
Yeah.
I
Me
think that
too.
that kind of went away. Supermassive signed an 8-game deal with Bandai Namco, so they're off the market. And you have just a few other relationships that are kind of percolating out there. I even think they got some studios like Clap Hands and others got away from them too. So I feel like they have to refresh this. If they're going to do it the way they used to do it, they have to refresh by starting to fund new teams again, similarly to the way they used to. But I think what's interesting is that it seems like they're investing in all second party multiplayer projects, and their first party is mostly going to be focused, I would assume, on single player projects, of which they are best known.
I also appreciate that they're not too hasty. I think the ones that you mentioned that they sort of skipped out on, not that they made bad games or anything, but something like a Supermassive, I feel like after Until Dawn, they haven't really made anything that I found particularly interesting. And so I like that when PlayStation makes a move, it's one that makes sense and it's one that works really well and sort of fits the image that they've already built. They seem pretty aware when they do that. And Cog, I want to shift to you for the Xbox side of things and just kind of pick your brain on the opposite side of the trajectory, which is really Xbox will just wake up one day this year, I can almost guarantee it, and they're going to have another set of studios that they're just like, yep, we rolled them in. And the rumors we've just heard, and they are just rumors, are the likes of Crytek, IO Interactive. We've heard Warner Bros. Games, of course, and a multitude of others. And a number of those we really haven't seen Xbox work with extensively. At least with Bethesda, there was some type of exclusivity deals with Bethesda Game Studios, and most of their games ran better on Xbox. But what do you make of Xbox sort of just playing a game of numbers and just rounding up whoever they can, really most notably with Bethesda as of late? But in 2018, they round up 5 more studios with Ninja Theory, Compulsion, so on and so forth. In 2019, they add in Obsidian, InXile. They're just grabbing everybody. And it seems like people who work with them are happy, but there isn't that long-standing history. Like Ninja Theory was an interesting one because they released Hellblade exclusively, I believe, on
Yeah,
PlayStation.
PlayStation. Yeah.
For $20, it's a hit, and then Xbox comes in and buys them.
Right.
So money talks for these companies. But what do you make of the
Mhm.
opposite end, where they both have the same goals, but they're accomplishing them in different ways?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see, the chart, what's been going on. And to me, I look at it as, the philosophy change as far as Game Pass being the driver and the motivator. And if you're going to have a subscription service, obviously you need to feed it, you need to cultivate it, you need to have that content. And to me, the most significant thing is, seeing Microsoft and Satya invested. That to me, like when they have that press conference prior to an E3 or Microsoft Bethesda showcase, to me, that was the level of commitment I always wanted to see from them, because
Mhm.
prior to that, I always felt like Xbox was a side project that not necessarily was the most profitable for them, but it was something that they kind of dipped their toe in, whereas Microsoft as a whole, as an entity, was the bigger picture. And I think to me, Phil's greatest accomplishment is somehow selling the idea of Game Pass as this driver for Microsoft. And if you have that, then in turn, you're going to need studios to feed this. You're going to need games to feed this. When you see the interviews, you see the comments of a game a quarter, things like that. You can't do that without studios. So I think that's where they're at. I think they, the prior generation, a lot of IPs they didn't own, they didn't have the rights, they didn't have the deals. So when the fans were like, hey, where's the sequel to such and such? They didn't really control the IP. So I think that's what's going on. As far as the rumors are concerned, I completely agree with you. I think we are definitely going to hear more. I was actually surprised we didn't hear, Avalanche. Obviously, we saw Contraband,
Right.
kind of thing, that kind of thing. IO Interactive, that's another one. You hear the rumors there. Crytek, you talked about on Defining Duke and stuff like that. I would love a Rise sequel. Again, these are
Oh
IPs,
yeah.
you know what I mean, that
Mhm.
started on that platform. And then it's like, I always think Sony does a phenomenal job of that, of maybe it doesn't knock it out the park the first run, but the second one, there's a sequel. It's afforded that. And then you cultivate like an Uncharted. You have these great things. So yeah,
Mhm.
I definitely see it coming on. And the last ones, I think for me personally, I think they need to shoot for game diversity. We talked about the fighting game genre. I would love NetherRealm, Phil. I would love NetherRealm. Just say, if it's possible, if WB is part of this, the rest of the properties are being sold individually, you know what I mean? And of course, I'm a
Right.
Sega kid, so I would love Sega,
Of
but
course.
to me, that makes sense. But yeah, I think we have not heard the last of it. This will continue to be that driver, that feeder of Game Pass, if that's the new model moving
Yeah,
forward.
it's interesting because Xbox fans, I always say they kind of effectively window shop for Microsoft. They just kind of sit there and go like, "That'd be pretty good," it's just because they know they got so much money that they could effectively buy all these companies and be totally fine at the end of the day. I always thought it'd be wise for them to invest, and Phil even said this himself, more globally, like something such as Japan. I think when you look at some of the studios that have been rumored, he more so meant Europe, but I think Japan's always been a sore spot for them, and they do need to address that in spades.